How you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Oh, hanging in there. Being in quarantine isn't much different from being retired.
A little different.
A little. Don't go out as much as I usually do, but I'm doing a lot more home projects than I was.
Tom, are you quarantined because you were positive or are you just isolated?
Just isolated.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Belle. Hey.
But we're taking it pretty serious since I'm of that age group.
Tim and I both tested positive in March the 20th.
Oh my goodness.
We didn't get results from the test. We took the test March the 20th, but I think we were actively engaged on 15th.
Oh my.
We didn't get results of the test until April the 2nd. By that time, we'd done the whole course. I was a bit sick, but not really very, very sick, but mostly headache and fever. And everything tasted salty. But I just lay around and took Tylenol and rested. Tim had a bit of a fever, but really not involved so much. We did think then when they called us and told us that we did test positive, we'd stopped taking our temperature a couple days out before that because we didn't feel the need. We were feeling okay. And we thought at that time that we were immune and not infectious. But then as the developments went on, nobody's really sure of anything. So we're wearing masks, but not going out much at all. My garden is...
I'm sorry to hear you got sick, but glad it wasn't terrible. So
yeah, we feel very lucky. We really feel very lucky that it played out as it did, and hope that things continue to go well.
Yeah, I hope so too. And
thanks.
Yeah, it's scary stuff. We wear masks when we go out and that kind of thing, but you know, it's. I think even if the governor wasn't ordering it, I'd rather err on the side of caution.
Well, what do they say? Abundance of caution is a good thing.
Yep.
In this situation.
Yeah, indeed so.
We have 8 participants.
Well,
supposed to have, I guess. Well, I don't know.
Okay, Tom, so it looks like I think we have everybody. That might be Edie calling in. Anne, are you on the line there?
I am, if I can find my unmute button.
I think you did.
There you are.
I think you did.
Perfect.
there you are. Good. All
Perfect.
right. Well, with 4 out of 5, I feel confident we can go ahead then and hope Edie can join us somehow or another.
Edie, is that you that just joined?
That is me. It was telling me I was muted, but I am here.
Hey,
Oh,
good.
okay, great.
Okay.
Good. So we're 100%. Well, let's call the meeting to order. We've got all 5 of the members here, plus Jill and Megan and Deb all listening in. The minutes of the March 4th meeting. Anybody have any?
Actually, Tom,
Yes.
if I can just for a minute, sorry, since we're new to this whole virtual thing, what we've been asking people to do for the record under the roll call is actually do it verbally. So to kind of go down the list and let everybody verbally respond that they're here, just for the official record, if you don't mind.
Oh, don't mind a bit. This is Tom Clemens, and I'm here. Gary Rohr.
I am here.
and Vernell,
I am here.
and Anne,
I am here.
and Edie.
I am here.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Any additions, corrections, comments to the March 4th meeting minutes?
I had one correction. I think it's on the back page when it was talking about the Preservation Maryland. It's Nicholas Redding.
Righto.
Ah. And we all know him well. We should have caught that. Thank you.
That was my only change.
Okay, any others?
No, none here.
All
No.
right. All right, thank you. We will assume that the minutes are approved by acclamation and move on. New business, the Leitersburg Ruritan Club Community Center. Oh, that's minutes. Sorry. Get to the agenda, Tom. Too many papers on too small a desk. 55 West Oak Ridge Drive, the update. What's going on with Carvana or what have you?
From Anne not too long ago, a few days ago. Apparently there are some rumblings out there that Project Cardinal may be not coming to fruition. I have no confirmation of that one way or the other. To be honest with you, there's a lot of rumors floating around out there. The only thing that I can tell you is that they are not proceeding forward on the schedule that they had originally brought forward to us, i.e. they wanted to have a June approval so that they could start getting permits and so forth. To my knowledge, there's still a lot of things to be worked out, and they haven't brought new information to us yet. So hard to tell what that truly means in terms of that project moving forward. As I hear more, I will keep you updated on that. What I did want to provide another update on is there continues to be interest from other entities throughout the county in the salvaging of those resources. The most recent one has come from a gentleman in the south part of Hagerstown who is interested in actually moving both resources in their entirety to their property. This is going to beg the question of a later discussion for us in terms of how involved we get in salvage operations and that kind of thing, because it's still private property. They're still privately owned resources. So there's really nothing that we can do at this level other than put the property owner and the person who wants to salvage the resources in contact with one another. And that's what I plan on doing. But at this point, I've tried a couple times to get in contact with the developer of the property for Project Cardinal in terms of setting up a date for us to come in there and detail and log everything in the property that they had talked about previously. And I have not heard a response yet. So I don't know if that plays into the whole, maybe they'll be here, maybe they won't, or what that means, but I can't seem to get any feedback from them. I'll keep trying. And I'll also say that I haven't heard any rumblings that they are moving forward toward the demolition at this point.
Jill, I have
As
two,
we all know, sometimes that can happen overnight without anybody knowing, but at this point, that's where we stand.
Jill, I have two concerns, and you just touched on one of them. if this project is hanging out there willy-nilly, I have the concern that those structures could disappear and the project never happen. Not that one makes it right, but that's one concern. In the past, for your information, we have never really, and you got, Tom, you can correct me. We have never really gotten hands-on with the relocation or salvaging. We have always just been encouragers and tried to help with resources as far as interested parties and that sort of thing. But we don't actually we have not gotten involved in the past, per se.
Yeah, that's correct. I think Jill is doing exactly what really we have done in the past and all we can do, which is encourage the two parties to get together. But you're right, Jill, we don't want to get the county in the middle of trying to be a salvage dealer here. I'm sure that's not going to go up the chain and with any real favor.
The only thing I would say, Tom, is if these guys do a Fox Deceive move and they tear this thing down and they don't go forward with their project, that's really going to destroy credibility as far as I'm concerned in the future. But that's just scary.
Well, I think we all have that concern that, to me, the demolition ought to be tied to the commitment that you are going to go ahead with the project. I don't know, Jill, if there's any way we can do that, but once a permit's issued, there's not really any controls. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, that's correct. The latter is correct, that we cannot tie any kind of demolition permit to a project. It's basically if somebody has been issued the demo permit, in this case they have been, it can come down at any time.
Even if they're not the owners?
No, only if they are the owners, the owner of the property. Now, if the developer wants to take it down, they obviously have to have the permission of the property owner, but it would be the property owner's responsibility to demo the resource.
Just to refresh my memory, who is the property owner right now?
It is still the Review and Herald Publishing Company.
So they could take it down and this whole Carvana thing could never happen.
They could potentially do that. I will say this, I don't know that company has that interest. They were kind of, I think, only going along with it as part of selling the property. They were never, in my mind, going to be the ones to demo those resources.
Yeah.
Their intention was just to basically sell the property and then let the new owner deal with that issue.
So
So
Jill,
does the demolition permit convey then?
No, I don't think so. I'd have to double check that. Well, actually, no, I take that back. I bet it does convey because it goes with the resource, not with the property owner.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I mean, addressing Gary's concern and what I kind of sense Edie is bringing up also is we've seen this movie before, something gets torn down and then a deal falls through and we've lost a historic resource and we got nothing, and it sounds like there's not much we can do about it, but I don't like it.
is there
Right now, I think the only, go ahead.
I was going to ask Jill if there's any way this can get built into the county plan, or, it seems to me this is a really important discussion that's kind of an offshoot of the demo permit process is, since the developer came in and asked for the demo permit, are they the holders of the demo permit, even though they aren't the owner of record, or is the Review Herald? Who did the permit get issued to, and is there any way where there's a process we could bring up to the county commissioners, to the planning board and the county commissioners, this idea of preserving the buildings until the project actually is moving forward.
And yeah,
Answer the, go ahead, Gary.
the only thing I was going to say, and I still have a sour taste in my mouth from all of this, that nobody cares. It's pretty obvious. The planning commission didn't want to extend the courtesy of having a discussion, and the county commissioners will not stand up for any of this. So you're barking up a tree, and I don't see it happening. I think
Well,
Am I
I think
mistaken?
it has merits, but don't get me wrong, it has merit, but it's just spinning our wheels in mud. Nobody cares.
Well,
I
if
hear
I-
where you're coming from, but I just think we ought to keep bringing it up so that maybe it will get some purchase.
I agree.
Did this
Yeah,
company ask for the annexation? Is that ongoing, or did I make that up? I thought I saw in the newspaper that this property was one of the askers for annexation to Hagerstown. And if that's the case, then it becomes a Hagerstown issue rather than a county issue? Am I mistaken that
Well,
they?
let me go back. No, you're correct.
Okay,
Let me go back to Anne for a minute and answer that question. The first part of your question was, who has the permit? The answer to that question is, it is held by the property owner, which would be the Review and Herald property. The Project Cardinal folks, I'm sure, Carvana, they applied through an affidavit process with permission from the property owner to seek that permit. So the permit stays with the property owner. Now, what would happen is that the property owner can designate somebody else to demolish that property, such as Carvana or something else. It was my understanding the way that was to go was that the Carvana folks were just trying to get all of their little ducks in a row and do all of their due diligence prior to purchasing the property. And it's, again, my understanding that the Review and Herald company has no interest in demoing the historic resources at this point. They are simply seeking to sell the property. So while they may hold that demolition permit, to my knowledge, they have no interest in moving forward with any demolition. It was the developer's initiative to do that. So maybe they'll hold that as a card for their sale of the property. Maybe they won't. At this point, it's kind of up in the air. All I can tell you is that the Review and Herald property are the ones who hold that permit, and that permit has been issued. Therefore, those resources can come down at any time, regardless of whether or not development occurs on the property. So that's kind of a summary of what I can give you for that.
Okay.
Is there a time limit on that permit?
I don't know. I'd have to look at that for you. The
But I
second
think
half
the
of
concern that
Anne's
I-
question. Go ahead,
Oh,
Tom.
go ahead. No, that's all right. Go ahead, finish.
I was just going to say the second half of Anne's question in terms of tying a demolition permit to another activity would be difficult. I'm not going to say it's impossible, and I'm not going to say that it's not something that we cannot look further into. We can definitely look into that issue and see if there's precedent for that across the state or how that works. I don't have a firm or good answer for you on that yet. So we can look into that and get back to you. To
Mike.
answer Vernell's question, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tom.
No, you finish.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make sure I answer everybody before I forget the questions.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So to answer Vernell's question with regard to annexation, this was again something that the Review and Herald, I think that there was an application made. However, the Review and Herald basically told the city of Hagerstown they have no interest as the property owner to petition for annexation. It would be entirely up to the developer. So that annexation was put on hold because essentially what the city was told is we're going to wait for the transfer of land. The Review and Herald will not petition. They refused to petition for annexation. They basically said, you're going to have to wait for Carvana to purchase the property, become the legal owner, and they'll have to petition. So at this point, the annexation is on hold indefinitely, depending upon who and when and what happens with the development that is yet to come.
Okay, thanks, Jill. I appreciate that update, and that does help. My concern is that the process that what we've seen so far from our standpoint as a committee is that three guys who we don't know came in and said, we're going to buy this property, we're going to demolish these historic structures because we're going to do wonderful things for this area that are going to create all kinds of jobs and money and prosperity. And they got their permit. Now, if I was somebody who had a historic structure I wanted taken down, I'd get my cousin from out of town to come in and testify that he was going to buy the property and create a wonderful business and all kinds of money, and that's why I want to tear the property down. And I'd get the permit and tear the property down and say, oh, the deal fell through.
Bingo, my whole point.
Yes, exactly, Gary. Now, maybe you and I are cynical, but I mean, I can see this being played out pretty easily, and that's what concerns me about the process.
If there was an ounce of concern for historic preservation in this county, there would be some sequence of events tied to the issuing of a permit, not a denial, but an obligation or a sequence of events that assured that a permit to remove historic structures actually resulted in some kind of beneficial plan.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, and I don't know, Jill, where you could work that into your revisions of the whole process, but I mean, that possibility is there. Maybe it's far-fetched, but I think, such a thing could easily be played, and there's just nothing we can do about it.
Well, I'm willing to bet that no one on the first floor of 100 West Washington Street cares, Tom. And I got to shut up because I just get really cranked up over this whole thing. There's just no checks and balances. So you want to tear that down? You're going to bring jobs? Sure. Go ahead, tear it down.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm saying is maybe in the revising that Jill's going to do, maybe we can address this.
I hope so.
Yeah, I do too. Any other comments on that?
I don't think, not for me.
Okay. Well, Jill, you have a sense of where we're coming from?
I do. We'll do some research on perhaps some other areas, what they do, and get you some information back.
Okay. I think you understand what I'm saying and what Gary's saying. And so if we can look into that, that'd be great. And while we're already in a bad mood, let's talk about the demo permit process.
So we have been not as much lately because of COVID issues and some other things creeping up on us. But, prior to the county sort of going to a teleworking situation, we were working on the issue of the demo permit policy and going back to the county commissioners with perhaps a revised schedule for meetings that could potentially reduce some time in between the Planning Commission meeting, which is held the first Monday, and the Historic District Commission meeting, which is held the first Wednesday. We haven't made any further progress on that We wanted to kind of confirm with the group that is something you might be interested in to help progress this forward. We don't have any other revisions because I think we're pretty firm in what you've been discussing for months and months and months in terms of asking for a little bit of additional time before that permit is issued in order to, work with the property owners and so forth. So at this point, I think what we're going to do from a staff level is just gain a consensus from the group that whether or not you would see the flexibility in changing meeting dates to help accomplish some of these goals, whether or not we may need to add a second meeting just because of meeting that 45-day period that's set out by state law. I don't think we're going to need second meetings if we adjust our meeting date, but that's another option that you have. And then just a general consensus that, do you want the 60 days? Do you want 90 days? How would you like to approach that final date with the county commissioners? We'll take it back before them, whenever their next available date would be, and have that discussion again.
I'm trying to understand how this change in the schedule helps us.
So changing the schedule, what that would do is currently, because the Planning Commission meets the first Monday of every month and the Historic District Commission meets the first Wednesday of every month, the way that we have to advertise and put out agenda packets, essentially what happens is that by the time somebody gets to the Historic District Commission, there could potentially be already 20 days in to the review period. And then the Historic District Commission would review that permit, and then they would typically wait an entire 30 days to get to the Planning Commission. So what we were thinking was, if, let's say, the Historic District Commission meets, the third Wednesday. I'm just throwing out a date. I'm not, supporting one day over another or anything. But so if you meet the third week of the month and the Planning Commission meets the first week of the month, then that takes 15 days out of the review period, theoretically, right there. So adding on a little bit of extra time at the end, 30 days, 60 days, whatever, could be somewhat mitigated for by that shorter review period.
Right, and
Okay.
I think that makes sense, but
Okay.
I think this needs to be essentially a quid pro quo, in that if we do this, they would give us more time to work with property owners, as you suggest. So we maybe go in and ask for 60 days and say, but we're already cutting 15 days off of that because of our revised schedule.
Right.
I'm
Correct.
curious right now if we cut and I'm thinking out loud, because I looked at the permit schedule that you sent out, Jill, and I'm like, if you get a permit on February 24th and we meet currently on the first Wednesday of March, but the chart says that the planning department would wait for a full month before they would send the packet to us, and the HDC would see it up to 37 days after the permit was received, if it was received 24th. Is there a problem if it's received on the 24th and we review the packet on the first Monday, if we meet, the first Wednesday of the month, then there's a full month between HDC and the Planning Commission meeting. Those 30 days between the two meetings could be used for what we're talking about, which is working with the landowners to do the documentation that they would have to take to the Planning Commission that would show that they've done due diligence in applying for that permit, and the county is going to be left with a record of the historic resource. I'm sitting here going, wait, we've already got 30 days built in. Maybe we need to use those differently than we have been.
I was wondering that same thing.
Yeah, makes sense
The
to me.
issue at
And
hand, what happens, and here's inevitably always the problem, regardless of what commission you sit on, is we have to have a cutoff date of when we accept applications for things that go on the agenda. Because we have to put together those agenda packets. They have to be put up on the website for people to view so that they know whether or not they want to comment. And we also need to get those agenda packets out to the boards and commissions. Now, email is great because we can basically flip that information forward fairly quickly. But for those people on commissions who do not have email and so forth, we are stuck with the snail mail process. So there is a possibility there, but the problem is that we just do not have the staff capacity at this point to flip things that quickly. I mean, essentially what you would be asking me to do is say, okay, so I got a permit for a demolition today through the email. And what you're asking then is just to flip that to you that day for you guys to look at and then potentially talk about at the next meeting. Where that creates problems is in terms of tracking for us. I just do not have the staff right now to be able to handle that, because while I'm the one handling the permits now, Megan will be the one who is going to be handling the permits later. And the amount of job duties that we are expected to do right now with the limited number of staff, we just simply can't keep track of it.
Okay,
And I don't want things to get lost in the shuffle.
yeah, Jill, that makes perfect sense. I just needed that explanation of, and I totally get the fact that it needs to be conveyed to the public so that they know. But I guess where I would still go is, rather than putting the time after meeting with the Planning Commission to work with the landowners, I think we need to have a commission discussion about how can we work with you and your staff and whoever's applying for that demo permit to record the historic properties before they go to the Planning Commission. Because I'm afraid once they've gone through the Planning Commission, we'll never get the documentation. But it's really, I think what I've heard from my fellow commission members is that if it has to come down and if we have no way of preventing that, then let's at least get the documentation for the county history books. And probably the best time to do that is between our meeting and the Planning Commission meeting. So I guess right now I'm kind of going backwards, saying, I think I'd rather stay on our current schedule and look at how we can use that month between the two meetings.
well, that makes sense to me, Ann. I mean, somebody wouldn't come in and file for a permit if they didn't want to tear it down. And if they're going to tear it down, I think it would be, proper for us to say, okay, let us come in and document it since you want to tear it down, whether the Planning Commission agrees or not. You want to tear it down, so you shouldn't object to us documenting it beforehand.
Or requiring them to document it, telling them what they have to
Yeah.
produce.
That's a thought too. Sure.
Because I know Jill's staff doesn't have time to do it.
Oh, no, no. And I mean, it's not really fair to keep working on the same volunteers to go out and do it either. So,
Well, I have a
I
question.
think those
This
are
is
very
Edie.
valid points. Yeah, go ahead, Edie.
But on your schedules that you wrote out here, in the current schedule, the application receive date seems to be a deadline of the last week of the month. But on the potential schedule, you have much earlier dates except for the March date. Is it possible to do that, to change the application deadline date so that there's actually time to get it to us for our meeting, whichever date we decide, so that we still have that time in between? I mean, if you change the application date, would that give us that extra time? Does that
It
make
looks
sense?
as if there's about a month between on each schedule, between the receive date and the date to mail. It looks like about a month every time.
Down on the bottom, it looks like we're skipping every other month.
Yeah, because what we had done there is kind of planned for worst case scenario in terms of when an application might come in. So the way I had Deb set that up, that matrix set up, is to say, okay, when is our sort of the best time that we can give a cutoff for applications? And at the very least, we felt like the week before the meeting would be really pushing it in my mind. But in the same respect, if we're trying to be flexible and squeeze out time within this process, 1 week ahead of the meeting would give us theoretically time to send things out and put things up on the website. Now, that would drastically reduce your review times. And the other problem, it's not a problem. The other issue would be is we would essentially have to go to electronic versions of the agenda rather than paper copy. And I'm not hearing any issues with that. But if you wanted to do it a week ahead, then we would be doing electronic agendas and be putting up the agenda packets on the website maybe 3 or 4 days prior to the meeting. That's what we're looking at. So how much time do you want for review, and how much time is appropriate for public review is really what this is going to boil down to.
Well, that was my question. Is it's really not a big problem for us to have it a week ahead of time, but is that really a fair advance notice for other people who might have an interest in a particular demolition?
That was my concern too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other complication to that, I'll add to that, is the fact that unfortunately right now we have your commission and the planning commission meeting the same week. So that means that Deb has 2 agenda packets to get together and put out in the same week. Again, not impossible, not improbable. I'm just throwing out the variables for you to think about in terms of, again, I feel like this is going to kind of boil down to your review time and the public review time. And then, just taking into consideration staff time it'll take to put agenda packets together.
I think the public review time is important. I really do. I think about things like that property that, we were also concerned about and had a lot of public come in and comment about. And I don't know that a week's notice would really be enough for folks to make plans to attend. I don't know. I'm interested in what the other committee members think.
I think a week is way too short for people
Yeah.
to become concerned and get informed and make plans. I thought the idea of a shortened time as a compromise, as a bargaining chip to add review time. Is that what you were saying, Jill?
It adds review time in terms of not, how do I want to put this? Instead of increasing or decreasing review times, it would instead stagger review times. So while you still have
Okay.
time to review the permits, and you could take 30 days or 45 days, whatever the law says, but in order to add those extra few days at the end, or the 30 days, the 60 days, whatever, to make that palatable to those in opposition, I was
Mhm.
trying to find ways to buy time.
Yeah, not
Oh,
make it longer, basically,
right.
not really make it longer.
Right.
If I can, Jill, you get if we just use the current schedule, you get the applications on February 24th.
Mhm.
You've indicated that you mail the packets to us on the 23rd, which is a week before, and I presume that's when the public would get notice for our meeting on the 1st. If we want to have more review time before we actually meet, it would probably be better if you got the applications on February 24th, if we got the packets, say, a week later, and the public got the packets a week later, that would give them about 3 weeks notice before the meeting is held to have the discussion with the commission. The commission, we know, can recommend against the permit, but we don't have a whole lot of options, basically.
Mhm.
And then, so we meet, let's say we meet on April 1st,
Okay.
and we say we recommend against this demo permit, and we request that the landowner document the resources outside and inside of the building during the next 33 days before it's heard by the planning commission. That achieves the documentation. It doesn't lengthen the review process any more than what we currently have. It gives the public 2 extra weeks. It gives us 2 extra weeks to research into the property and figure out what's most important from a historic, what role did that piece of property play in our history here in Washington County? What's the condition of it? Is there stuff that we think needs to be documented or salvaged so that we can actually have a full-throated discussion on that, and then have that month between meetings builds in. But I'm also hearing from you that you guys have, as a staff, a real crunch because the planning commission is meeting on Monday of the week and we're meeting on Wednesday of the week. And I'm flexible enough to say, okay, you tell us how you want to stagger those 2 meetings, but I still want a month. I would still want a month between the HDC meeting and the planning commission meeting so that we make sure that the documentation is done. Because once the planning commission meets, whether they
Right.
agree with us or not, the permit is issued and it can
It's
come down
done.
immediately.
Right.
Right.
But do we have the power to actually require somebody to record a property before they even know whether they're going to get the permit or not?
Well, from what Jill said, they're automatically going to get the permit.
Well, that's more the reality than the theory, but yeah. I
How
mean, the
much,
theory.
So
how much recording is necessary in the application process? Could that all be done beforehand?
That's another great idea.
this
Yeah,
brings
that's-
up and touches
and-
on another issue that we've been dealing with, and Megan's been researching the last few weeks in terms of how we move forward. And we'll touch on a little bit here later in the conversation when we talk about updating the historic sites inventory. But the research that we have found is, yes, first we need to update the inventory. But as part of that, the discussions we have been having internally is the need to prioritize, and I don't know another way to put it, but basically to prioritize our resources. And I think
Mhm.
that helps a little bit in terms of letting people know, how important certain things are. Now, to go along with that, some research that we have done is like in Frederick County, where they have a demo permit process where they require you to document the resource prior to its demolition. So that's essentially the discussion that I'm hearing here.
Mhm.
Is there's a lot of things that we want with this demo permit. We want to include certain things like tying it to construction or requiring documentation and things like that. And those can all be parts of the discussion as far as the demo permit goes. What the only thing we have laid out for you at this point in time is the discussion of the timing and what that extra time is meant to gain us. So I think when we go back to the Board of County Commissioners, that's the discussion to have is, look, we want this time built in. We're trying to find ways to make it amenable to developer schedules and understanding that time is money and all that other kind of stuff, but also recognizing the importance of recording and documenting our history. So I hear everything you're saying, and I think these are things that we can add to the discussion.
Yeah,
I guess that's
okay.
it for me.
Well, I'm kind of getting the sense we're not going to resolve this here tonight, but I think we have provided some input. I mean, number one, I
Yeah.
think the idea of documentation somewhere along the way being a requirement for demolition, and the idea of having at least a month between our decision and the Planning Commission's decision to try to, number one, work with the property owner, and number two, allow time for documentation if that's the appropriate time to do it. Does that make sense?
We are already set up with that month in between right now.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, that would, if that's what we're wanting, then we don't need to make a change. But if we
Well-
want to, I think the idea was to reduce some of the time in review so that there's some extra days we could add on.
Well, and maybe the way to do this is to look at the extra time if and only if the Planning Commission approves it. In other words, if we say no, we recommend against it, and it goes to the Planning Commission, and by some miracle they say we recommend against it too, then fine, we're done. It's not going to happen. But if they say, no, we think this can happen and go forward, then we say, okay, now we want another 30 days to work with the property owner to document the property, whatever.
But the comment that I heard, I think it was for Nell, that makes so much sense to me and maybe resolves the whole issue between our commission and the planning commission, is looking at the documentation process that should occur before the demo, or at the time somebody applies for a demolition permit, they have to have X, Y, and Z information recorded on the historic building before they can even apply for the permit. And I think that's what I heard Jill say they're discovering Frederick County does.
And that makes so much sense. It puts the responsibility on the person asking for the demolition. That doesn't mean that there shouldn't be further investigation, but at least the applicant is aware that there is this issue that needs to be considered and is asked to justify what he's wanting to do, or she.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me.
So is it,
Okay. Go ahead, Ann.
I was just going to ask if it's possible for you and Megan to maybe send out the Frederick County process to us so we can take a look at it, or any other county that you've discovered has something that you think is maybe a model for us to look at.
Yeah, that would be a good idea.
Yeah, we definitely can look into that. Megan's got a few slides here that she put together, things that we've talked about adding into the demo permit process in terms of trying to be proactive versus reactive. So I think what'll happen, Megan, is there another slide there? I'm sorry. Can't
Yes.
remember.
Did you want to go over this one or go to the next one?
Yeah. Well, I think we talked about the idea of sending out mailings to let people know that they may have a historic home and there are tax credits that are available.
I want to compliment
Targeted
you,
mailing.
Jill and Megan, for putting the links on the historic property inventory. I was in there today trying to figure out who owned the hive and saw these links. I'm like, clicked on them. I was like, yes, what a wonderful thing. You've got the new brochure on tax credits and everything. And I just want to tell you guys, good job.
Yeah.
Thank you. Steve still
That
would go
is-
pull the book,
that is-
but I tried to get him to use them.
That right there is 100% Megan. I promised you that you would get new blood and new enthusiasm, and she is proving it up one side and down the other. So good things are coming, promise. Other things that we've talked about for the demo permits, trying to reduce and be proactive, is the school outreach. Coming up with maybe a public relations campaign. Somebody brought up the idea of taking some of Pat Schooley's old articles and rerunning them in the newspaper. Other things there, hosting workshops, things like that, for different people related to historic. What else you got there, Megan?
This is the last slide for this part.
Okay, perfect.
We'll get
Okay.
into more
Okay.
stuff later, but yeah.
So to kind of sum this all up and move us forward, how about what we do is Megan and I will go back and try to sort of develop a plan of attack, more or less, in what we want to present to the Board of County Commissioners in terms of moving forward with demo permit processes, both timely and in documentation and so forth. And then we'll bring that back to the group here in the next month or so as we get more information. We can also look up models and things like that. Megan's got a lot of information to present here a little bit later that will also tie into all of this. So how about is that a good summary of kind of where we're going here?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
All right, so we're moving on. Next is new business, the Rife Church Road mudroom.
That actually doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I have a feeling we can probably dispense with this pretty quickly, but it looks like they're already ahead of us.
It's already demolished. There's no point.
No.
Yeah. I'm not going to go into how many explicatives were running through my mind when I went out there and took those pictures the other day. But much to my chagrin, the structure was pretty much already gone. They're also talking about removing this one-story shed that you see here. Doesn't look like I don't have any other pictures. Megan can go through the older pictures that come with the survey. You can kind of see what the mudroom looked like there on the back. There was a little breezeway that connected to, probably my guess would be like an outdoor kitchen. Does that sound about right?
It looked like a summer kitchen to me.
Yeah. So Jill, can I ask a question? If they demolished it before they ever got the permit, do they get fined the $100?
Jill went back and looked at that.
I can technically put in that.
Nobody ever has been fined.
The answer is correct. Nobody's ever been fined. Yet again, much to my chagrin, when I saw it, I was thinking the exact same thing. Now, what do I do? I don't know. I will put in that question.
I think it would be good if we as a commission could essentially send a message of sentiment to the commissioners to say, here's an example of what we're talking about. Somebody demolished something without a permit. They came to us after the fact and nothing ever happens.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't think that's right. We think there ought to be something going on here. Segueing into our ongoing discussions with the Planning Commission, because this is exactly why we went to them in the first place. Now we have an exhibit and say, okay, this has happened. What do you all think we should do?
Yeah, is this the time to say you don't get a building permit?
Wow,
because they need a building
Again, I
permit.
don't think we have the regulatory authority.
Well, they should at the very least be fined the fine that is on the books, even if it's never been done.
Yeah,
it's on the books. It should be done.
Mm-hmm.
If we ever want to get a hold of this demolition problem in this county, we got to start following through.
Well, it makes sense to me, Adie. I mean, if we do it, it may get some attention somewhere along the road. Maybe not with this particular one, but somebody else might see this and say, oh, maybe I better do it right.
Well, even the Planning Commission, I think the general sentiment on the Planning Commission was that the $100 fine was too low.
Meaningless, basically.
And I just think, and I will gladly make a motion, maybe Gary will second it for me, that on this one, because they applied for the demolition permit but they demolished it before going through the process that we, the Historic District Commission, recommends they be handed the $100 fine.
Who would issue that fine? The county commissioners?
No, the building, well, Jill should probably answer that. Probably the permit section.
Because I'm wondering who would object
Yeah.
to issuing the fine? What political reasons are there that they would say, oh, no, 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 we can't do that? Or who would say that?
I don't know. Typically, what we would do, first of all, if is there a motion on the floor? I don't want to answer too much here if there's a motion.
Well, I sort of asked for one, and I think one was basically made. But yeah, I think if we, as a commission, tell Jill that we think this merits the levying of the fine, then Jill can take that back and pass it up the chain to whoever, the appropriate authorities would be. Does that make sense?
Don't be surprised if they hand it back to you.
No, I'm not, but
No, I've only lived here 40 years or so, Gary, and not much surprises me.
I think the
Well, I
motion
second the
and
motion.
the letter is a good idea. So is there a motion on the floor? Is Ann, is that your motion?
yeah, I made a motion that we recommend, since the demolition happened before we even considered the permit, that a fine be issued.
Okay, and Edie, are you seconding that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think that's unanimous. I can do the roll call if we need to, Jill.
No, that sounds good to me.
Okay, so you have
I
a
will
unanimous motion
respond.
that the fine be levied. Okay.
Did Jill
Yep, we'll
want to
take care of
say
that.
something?
Pardon?
Probably what I'll have to do, I'll just basically get in contact with the code enforcement officer. I think is Rich Eichelberger right now. And I'll have a discussion with him about the fact that we wish to have the fines levied. I don't know how much discussion there really is to it. If you break the rules, you break the rules, but I can't promise you that the political wills won't come into play. I don't know. It'll probably be whether or not the property owner is upset enough to complain.
Well, and Jill, I think that's exactly it. I mean, we can't control it, but what I would hope is that if the fine is not levied, we have a
Right.
person or a body that's going to stand up and say, I made the decision.
Yeah.
That's all I want.
Good.
Okay?
Yep.
All right.
Do we
Jill,
have to
you,
review-
after the
Do we have to
agenda.
review their addition?
Yeah, this is the Beaver Creek Bridge, which if Gary on a good day hit his driver from his front porch could probably hit the bridge.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Tom,
Yes.
were we supposed to review their addition?
Oh, wait a minute. Let me go back and look at this again.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, we were.
Yes, we were. Thank you.
And before we saw the midnight demolition, I was all set to recommend that we approve it because I don't see any problem with it. I just resent the process.
I agree with
Well-
you there.
So do I.
Yeah. Agreed. And I mean, maybe that's the way to carry this forward, Jill, is to say, we think the $100 fine is the minimum. We'd be tempted to deny the permit. That's not our,
I'll just take it to the planning commission and they'll approve it.
Oh, I'm sure, but
Well, they did mention a heftier fine until a discussion followed. But I think there might be a feeling to agree that $100 is not much force there. But if
yeah, it
that's what it
isn't. I mean,
is,
we
I think
can't,
we should still ask for it. And if we approve the demolition, even, and I'm in favor of that, they still did it before the approval, so they should be fined.
yes.
And we already said we wanted to fine them.
Okay. So we do need to then make a decision about whether we approve the addition or not.
Well, I thought our powers was basically the recommendation on the demo permit.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we approve the addition itself, do we?
No.
Okay. So we've just made the recommendation for the fine.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So are we back to the Beaver Creek Bridge then?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't quite sure from looking at this and reading it exactly what the problem was with the bridge that they need to fix. Gary, you have any insight there?
Yeah, it looks like the spandrel walls are starting to give way, Tom, especially on the upstream side.
Okay.
It doesn't show, of course, this plan isn't meant to implement construction, but they're obviously going to be working from private property. I don't know if it's going to require deviation of traffic or not. It looks like it's mainly underpinning. If you look at sheet 4 of 4, it shows a grout process. There's a phenomena that takes place in bridges of all types, but in particularly our older structures that may not be situated on a stone foundation. That may not, in other words, there's not a stone bed in the stream or anything. And it's
Ooh.
called scour. What happens is over a period of time, depending upon stream velocities, when the waters flood, the velocity of the water, believe it or not, as the water recedes, is at a very high rate, and it's undermining the foundations. And so before they see these things go kaput, they come in with this process, and we use it. I'm not we anymore. The county uses the same process on its bridges, Stone Arch and others. And that's one thing I see here, but it looks like they're repairing mostly from the side, just trying to take care of the bulging spandrel walls. Now, if you remember Burnside, when that happened, it was necessary, and in most cases usually is, to dismantle the spandrel wall down to the arch. If they do that, they're going to have to close one lane of traffic, but that's neither here nor there with us. But it looks to me from that one photo that that's what's going on, is the spandrel walls bulging. And it's usually a freeze thaw phenomenon that's going on. Water's getting down behind it.
Well, and I think that we would all agree that we want the bridge preserved as best we can. So
I don't have any problem with what they're doing. In fact, I can cut to the chase if it helps. I would make a motion that we approve it. We need to be on the good side of state highway. I've been down on them hard enough about Devil's Backbone. They at least need to know. They at least need to know that there's an ounce of civility in me. I made the comment earlier today to another preservationist that I've had a long-standing working relationship all the way up to the state highway administrator, but I can guarantee you after Devil's Backbone, there's a poster of me down there that says, "Do not resuscitate."
All right, well, we've got a motion from Gary about approving what the state wants to do with this bridge. Any second?
I'll
I-
have a second.
Can I break in for a second? Because I think what we were supposed to review was, did we agree that there was no effect
Right.
to the historic buildings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there shouldn't be, Edie. There shouldn't be.
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
But I don't think it was about,
so,
I don't think we were reviewing the work on the bridge.
Well, no, but the bridge is kind of like a chain reaction. So forgive me for referring to the bridge, but the project, I should say.
the project.
You're forgiven.
Okay, so we have a second.
We take no exception to what it is they want to do, and we don't see any harm posed for the surrounding structures. How's that?
Good.
That sounds good.
Okay. Again, just say your name if you approve the motion.
Gary?
Brunel.
Edie.
Tom? Okay, so we've got that taken care of.
Could I just have the person that seconded say their name again? Because I had trouble hearing that, and I'm sure Deb will when it plays back. Sorry about that.
I think there was more than one speaking at the time, but if you want to put me down as seconding it for now, that is fine.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great, okay. Other business, the historic tax credit brochure. Megan, you have a slide for that, huh?
I do. So I'll try to be as brief about this as possible. I actually took the brochure that so much work and effort went into and tried to make an online interactive version of it that also still has that brochure in it. So I wanted to show you guys that so that you know where it is. And also, if you want to take a look at it on your time, if Jill sent it out, I'm not sure if she sent the link, but you're welcome to provide any comments, any additions, things you'd like to see changed. So I am actually going to go here to the next one. You'll see the historic sites inventory and the tax credit. These are web applications here that the GIS folks handle. So I'm going to actually go out to that real quick just to show you what it looks like.
Nice picture of Burnside.
Yeah.
Yes, I stole that from someone else who was a much better photographer than me. So right here from your all's page on planning and zoning, you'll see we've got some additions. These are little things we've been working on. Not sure who mentioned it earlier, but just the historic resources map. We've been trying to make sure that's updated. And I'll get into this one a little bit more later, but I'm already going to go ahead and have it open. This is the one for the tax credits. That is this one. They match there. So the tax credit one is really just walking you through. I actually took pretty much word for word out of the brochure and added a few things in, trying to make sure that you had links to things that were referenced in the brochure, reiterating what's some of the 5 questions, who, what, when, where for these, trying to put a couple graphics in for what people can get with these credits. Talking about the Antietam overlay and the HP district a little bit here, kind of showing people where those are. This is a little quick map for the inventory. It's another option for people. Did a few frequently asked questions, which I believe the brochure had too. I just kind of pulled these in.
Nicely done.
Very nicely done.
So your brochure listed the Secretary of Interior guidelines, the National Park Service references, Historic Trust, and all of these. So these are all interactive links now. So if you were to click it, it's going to take you to the standards instead of having the static brochure. I'm one of those people that likes to have stuff be interactive. That's kind of the GIS person in me. So you're gonna you're gonna probably get a little bit more of that in the future. But the brochure is still here. I didn't want to negate the fact that you guys worked hard on that, because obviously it can still be printed and all the information is in here. So it's still there as well. And then our contact information down at the bottom of the screen for that. So that is the website portion update for the tax credits. And then I'm going to switch you back here 1 second. So you should be
Yeah,
seeing PowerPoint again. Did anybody have any questions on that now? Or do you, I feel like there's a lot to digest. I wanted you guys to be able to look at it on your own time, and just feel free to email me if you have anything.
I am awed.
Good.
That is fabulous. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it
Sure.
looks great. It really does. I think the Historical Advisory Committee did an awful lot of the work on that, more than we
Right.
did, but nevertheless,
Sandy Iser was the force behind
She's-
that one.
absolutely. And it's very well done, and making it interactive is even better. So thank
Oh,
you,
my
Megan.
goodness.
Sure, yeah, and I did make sure that they're referenced down at the bottom of the screen as well, because I did see them in the brochure. Unfortunately, they don't have any like a big web presence that I could link to for them, but I did try to make sure that they're at least down in the credits for it.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a very good suggestion that we will pass on to the advisory committee. Get a web presence. Yes, absolutely.
Jill wasn't with me back then, but 25 years ago, I had a county commissioner walk into my office and say, "We want to be able to make maps." And I said, "So do I." And that started, I had already automated the permit process. Everything was 25 4-drawer file cabinets of handwritten permits, and we automated that. And then he walks in one day and says, "We want to make maps." And that was the beginning of our GIS system. And Bud Gudmundson and I and Ron Witt, we started. And it's just nice to see 10 years out into retirement. It's nice to see what has evolved from all of that. It's a tremendous job you guys are doing.
I
Truly
will
great.
definitely pass that along, because I do feel like we're very lucky here in Washington County. We have a very robust GIS. We have an enterprise GIS system, so it's just very robust. We have a lot of users and a lot of people that appreciate the data, so it's always great to hear that.
Well, it came out of a Mako conference, thank heavens.
Oh.
I asked them for $250,000 in 1995. Do you know what it's like to ask county commissioners for $250,000 for something they can't put their hands on? And that's how we got started. So anyway, little reflecting back, but no, it's a good feeling to see that it's now a tool that's so easily accessible to anyone and everyone that wants to use it.
Yes, we have a lot of options out there for people, which is one of the things that I want to make sure when we do eventually do a PR campaign, that people are aware of the many different things that we can provide to them with GIS. So
Nice job.
thank you.
Megan, if this is you talking, and I'm looking at this screen now, the third bullet, expansion to contributing structures, not just residential. You have an example, bank barns. Do you include stone walls in that? As a contributing structure?
I would love to. These
Okay.
are my initial ideas. I worked with Jill initially to do the historic element for the comp plan that we're working on right now. And one of the things that I researched as part of that was the use of the tax credit program. And just going back through the minutes for previous years, I've noticed that it's not as widely used as I would have liked. And I'm sure that you all probably have the same idea, because you made a brochure trying to get the word out. So I was trying to brainstorm ideas on why that might be, why it's not used as much as it could be, and what are ways that we could use to promote it and to have more use. And these are some of the ideas I was
Mm.
tossing around. And then I also, Jill kind of hinted at it earlier, but I also went ahead and contacted all of the jurisdictions in Maryland with a quick survey. And included in that was the use of their tax credit program and what they thought the use was, if they felt like they had good use of it, and why. And if not, also why, to see if we're having similar luck getting people pulled into these programs as other jurisdictions. So I'm hoping to get those results back, and Jill and I can go through those and summarize those and get those back to you when we do. But these were my initial ideas, and I'd love to hear any comments you might have on these, either tonight or feel free to email again after you've had time to look at them. But these were some of my initial thoughts. So expansion to national register districts without having the HP, expansion to rural villages, again, no HP. I do love the idea of more than just a residential structure. We have so many things like that. I didn't particularly put the stone wall in, but I love that idea.
Let me
Well, please,
interject
please
something.
do.
Yeah, let me interject something. The engineer in me says, we so many times, so often, and Tom knows where I'm going, we so often refer to stone fences as stone walls. We have a lot of stone fences that are original, some of them in serious disrepair, some of them in very good tack, such as the Piper Farm. That's a dry laid stone fence.
Oh, yes, yes.
And we have a lot of stone fences, so we have to be careful that if you interject that somehow or another stone fence / stone walls is referenced, because we should, I think, try to preserve our stone fences. It's amazing when you're riding along South Mountain and we're given a tour and you look over beyond Fox's Gap and you're pointing to the remnants of stone fences that North Carolina troops stood behind and defended. And those are original stone fences. So I would encourage you to use stone fences / stone walls together.
I
Mhm.
have written both
Yeah.
down. I plan on sending this to Jill as a PDF so that you guys can obviously send comments back, because I'm not sure you would have gotten this particular slide in your packet. So this is obviously for discussion to see if you guys agree or have extra ideas, any thoughts on these things. The other couple of things were to promote the tax credits as part of Preservation Month in 2021.
Excuse me,
Sure.
is Preservation Month a designated month on some calendar somewhere? Because May is also a museum month,
Yes.
It's both. Yep.
both. Okay, it goes together, makes sense.
Mhm.
Yep.
So obviously that would be a great tie-in as well. I really want to work with you guys for next year to really have at least a once a week, if not more, things prepared for PR to put out to promote historic stuff during that entire month. And one of those things would be the tax credits. So I want to make sure we at least try that for next year, if you guys are in agreement with that. And then we have rolling mailings that we can do for historic points and tax credits, which I kind of had on another slide earlier.
Mhm.
And again, targeted mailings to people in the Antietam overlay, because the areas that are easier for these tax credits to get without having the HP overlay would be a really quick and easy way to get some more participation in. And then again, looking at whether or not we've had historic properties change hands with assessment data, I can actually do that with GIS and see if we can send out some targeted mailings for those tax credits again. And the last but not least, I'd really love to get your take on an increase in percentage to the credit, because I was not here when the 10% came about, obviously. But in doing research, I've found the highest was 50%. And
Wow.
our 10% is the lowest. So we're on the low end. I will say that the majority of jurisdictions were somewhere between the 10 and 20, but the highest was out on the West Coast at 50%. And I think that
What?
was in San Francisco, actually.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
My house will be 50 years old in 8 years. So, I like that idea.
Megan, is there a tax assessment GIS map? What I was doing today and why I discovered what you had done with the links and stuff was the Hive on Little Antietam Road, up outside of Leitersburg and Chewsville, has been purchased. It was purchased, I don't know, within the last year. The Hive is a house that was built probably in the late 1700s or early 1800s. And Vernell mentioned it at one of our meetings. But the new owner is repairing that house that I think everybody thought would never be repaired. And there's a new roof on it, on the main house, and on the kitchen wing, the old log wing has got a new roof. I mean, he's moving to really make that a livable house again. And I thought how wonderful it would be if we could outreach, the Washington County Historical Trust could outreach to them and bring them into an understanding, if he doesn't have it, of the tax credits, of the support network that's there for historic preservation in Washington County.
So the quick answer to your question is yes. The
Where do I find it?
I will actually go into that in the next portion, which is the inventory update, because that's more prevalent data in that map. There's not as much forward facing on the public side as I have on the back end. So I can get to more information than the public facing person can.
Okay, not surprising.
No, but yes, we do. That's actually one of my tasks with the department, has been to maintain and reconfigure, put in deeds and things for parcels for the county. So I am very familiar with the tax maps, and yes, we do have them in digital form, and they do have assessment information linked to them.
yeah, that's a great thing. I've used that a couple times myself for other purposes, but yeah.
So
Okay.
unless Jill had anything to add to this, I think we'd really just, wanted to bring this to you as food for thought, and get your suggestions on it, either at a later meeting, whether you want to talk about it via email or whatever. But these were some of the ideas that I was trying to drum up.
I think it's great. Yeah, I think it would be very helpful. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have no idea about tax credits, and this might raise some awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I would bring up increasing the percentage this year, but yeah, but it is a good idea.
So, yeah, so what we'll do then, Megan will put this in a PDF format so that I can email out the PowerPoint to everybody. Give you some time to think about it, digest what we're talking about, and if you have questions, comments, thoughts, we can, definitely email me or Megan, or just let us know what you think, and we'll continue to push forward.
That sounds great. Okay. Historic inventory, resource inventory update.
Tom,
Sir.
if you don't mind, I need to bow out of the meeting at this point. I've got something here at home I got to take care of. I think you've had me for the critical stuff. Would that be all right?
Yeah, that's fine, Gary. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Goodbye.
Good evening, all. Megan, keep
Hi,
up the
Gary.
good job.
Bye-bye, Gary.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to present this, or Megan?
Sure, I will run through these. I actually put some slides up here for more or less the general public. I'm pretty sure that this group already knows what we consider a historic resource. And I'm also fairly certain that we're all very familiar with the National Register criteria for evaluation. But again, you know, significant for architecture, persons, events, that kind of thing. I briefly wanted to touch on some of the categories that we have in the inventory. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this, but just for those that aren't, we have districts. We have approximately 50 or so of these in the county. We have sites. These would be archaeological sites. We have around 60 or so documented. Buildings, which is our largest category, we have nearly 3,400, if not a little bit over that now, buildings that have been documented at least partially. Structures, things like bridges and things like that, these we have about 100 of. And then objects, which a lot of people are probably familiar with, the National Pike milestones, Mason-Dixon line stones, those type of things are what we consider objects, and we have about 75 of those. This is just a quick slide to reiterate what the majority of our inventory significance category is. So when I first started with the county in 2008, I took the historic points, which were literally just the information that was in them was just the inventory number. And I went through each sheet that was there for that inventory number and pulled as much information off of it as I could and added it into GIS. So each point now has a majority of the inventory sheet information in it. And as you found out, that allows me to also link it to the state's already scanned images as well. So the majority of our inventory is significant for architecture, agriculture, exploration, and commerce. We have other categories, but those are the main ones. And this is a breakdown of the age. Of course, some of the inventory sheets don't list this, but the ones that do, this is the breakdown of the categories. And we briefly wanted to touch on the history of when we've actually done an inventory. So prior to 2002, which was with a comp plan cutoff date, these were the surveys that were completed and the number of contributing resources that were found with each of those surveys. And then since 2002, we've slowed down a bit. We haven't done any surveys in recent years, and we could continue to do more surveys, obviously. We can also continue to improve on things. I wanted to show you a map of areas where we have light blue, which are National Register districts, and then also our surveyed historic rural villages, and then yellow rural villages are ones that we haven't yet put on the survey. So we haven't gone in and surveyed those. So those were ones that I saw as kind of an opportunity area if you wanted to think about surveying those individually. So this is a breakdown of that GIS data that I mentioned. So our web map itself has the tax incentive brochure listed. Again, those interactive inventory sheets. If it's a National Register property, it also links to the state's description of that National Register property. And we also have parcels and USGS quad information, which is needed when you're filling out those surveys. So that information is in there as well. We have, for the GIS data set itself, these are the categories. So instead of just having that site number there, again, I tried to add as much common information as I could to the data set itself so that I can report on any of these categories. So we've added more than 15 other different fields of data that we can pull from. So that begs the question, what kind of updates are needed? Do you want to add new resources? Or do you want to improve upon the documentation? Because a lot of our documentation is not the full documentation. It's just that a quick look at whether or not it is going to be potential for National Register. It's not a full documentation of the property. There's not a lot of interior work. It's all exterior documentation. So some of the things that we've considered for updates to the existing data would be verifying the resource location again. When I did it in 2008, I did update the location for as much of them as I could. Sometimes they were showing up as points off in the middle of a field. So I wanted to make sure that if it was demolished and it was really in the middle of the field, that's fine. But also if it was actually supposed to be along the road, and I would determine that with the inventory sheet pictures, then I would move the point to where it needed to be. So we may need to do that again, verifying that they're actually there, whether they're existing, demolished, threatened. Prioritization. We think that this is going to be a good idea moving forward for some of the other things that you guys are working on, such as the demolition, but it's also a great thing to have in the inventory itself, is to figure out a prioritization that you want to have for these resources. And I have an example of one that I'll show you in a little bit. A lot of the documentation doesn't include pictures. So maybe going out to some of those threatened ones that we find and going ahead and taking really good pictures of them would be great. Also documenting the use of the structure just to see if there's, following into the next thing, any adaptive reuse or if it's still being used as a residential structure, because sometimes the use of the structure not being the original use might make it more susceptible to changes that won't allow it to be on the register at some point, and therefore might rank it a little lower prioritization wise. Things to consider like that. We also need to know what additional information might assist you guys in reviewing permits, because we can always add more information than what's just on that Maryland inventory sheet. And what information in that train of thought, what information hasn't been easily accessible for permit review in the past, if any. And I've noticed that we haven't really talked about it, at least I didn't see it. Perhaps Steve did talk to you guys about this, but with the expansion of the Civil War Heritage Area, I know that that took into consideration the resources that were in those areas, but if we actually need to do some more documentation in those areas where that's been expanded, that could be another area where we could really focus in on, and also another tie into tax credits perhaps with that area. And then are there any efforts or historical contexts that you want to pursue? So if there are eras in time that you feel are really important to Washington County that are underdocumented, say for instance, like the Fairchild era, if you feel like that is underdocumented, we could go up to the airport area and see if we have all of the structures in for that area, things like that.
One thing, Megan.
Sure.
The full name for the Civil War Heritage Area is Heart of the Civil War Heritage Area.
I will note that so that it's fixed before I send it out.
Okay, Heart of the Civil War Heritage Area. Very good.
Yeah, we've talked about this updating the resources. You know, particularly as you pointed out, the main survey was done in the 1970s, 50 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And the criteria at that time, I believe, was the age of the structure having to be 100 years old or something to that effect. Correct me if I'm wrong. And given that, 50 years or so has gone by, maybe we need to go back and look at it from that standpoint too, of what wasn't historical enough to be added then might be now.
Yes, absolutely. So I typically go with the 50-year rule just because of National Register criterias. But if you want to go a different route, we can. It's for documentation purposes, because I think as long as it's significant enough, that doesn't play into it. But I feel like the 50-year rule is probably a good idea for us.
Yes.
I think that one of the things that has been a problem, I mean, Jill, you did a great job going out and getting photos of the demo permit we we considered tonight, but it's only when we get a demo permit request that there are any updated photos of that particular property, inventory property taken. And I don't know if they get linked into the data that we have for that property. And I think somehow it would be really helpful because, as was just noted, those inventory sheets are 50 years old, and who knows what's the condition of some of the properties are now. They may have totally disappeared. They may have been bulldozed like Fox deceived. So almost a revisiting of that original inventory is also needed, as well as updating it for things that have aged into an historic inventory, if I can say it that way.
Well, yes, and as Megan pointed out, some of these weren't very complete when they were done then, you know, so revisiting them makes a lot of sense.
Yes. So one of the data columns that I have was whether there were photos included in the original. So that could be a starting point to capture the ones that we have no photos for and then move toward updating photos for ones that we have some photos for. And I didn't really capture how many photos and the quality of the photos, but at least if there were photos, I put a yes. So it's something to consider. Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
Is this something that we could do with, like they do citizen science projects now, where we can have a citizen team? I know I have some contacts in one of the DAR chapters that are really starting to get into the historic preservation and are willing to go out and do the documentation. If we could give them a checklist of what was needed.
So
Well,
that ties perfectly into this slide that I have here, where there is the necessity for a qualified professional to be involved. And there are guidelines that Maryland Historic Trust has in place, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't have volunteer time for things like that, as far as I'm aware. So this
I
particular,
think that's part of the discussion that we're trying to have here, Anne, is we're trying to give you ideas of things of what it is that you would like to see in the updated inventory, so that when we get to a point of essentially scoping out the work, we know what it is that you want to see. And then we can kind of break it down from there in terms of, well, what do we have the manpower to do? What do we have the regulatory authority to do? So forth and so on. So I think these are very valid points to bring up, and we acknowledge those. And we'll get more into that after we kind of get through the scoping process as well.
yeah, that was going to be my question is, you know, what are the financial resources to get all this done right now?
so as far as updating the inventory goes, our first point is going to need to be to contact Maryland Historic Trust and meet with them. They actually would be able to sit down with us or do a Zoom or something where we could discuss how they foresee an update process going. They also would walk us through, you know, the research design portion of it, which is kind of what the previous slides I had were trying to pull ideas for what your actual project goals might be for an update. And again, where you see reconnaissance level versus intensive survey, an intensive survey would be your submission for National Register, your actual submission. Reconnaissance level is the majority of our survey, where it's just strictly the exterior of a property with good documentation. Don't get me wrong, it's just not to the level of an intensive survey.
Yeah,
And
of course.
you also would need to complete resource documentation, and then they do have a very detailed guideline that you need to follow for submission to them. And again, you'll see in bold there those standards and guidelines for architectural and historical investigations. That's where a lot of this information comes from. And it was just updated in 2019, and it is quite thorough about how to go through this whole process. But again, meeting with them would be a good way to go. But as far as funding goes, we are a certified local government, and there are funding mechanisms available through that. And I contacted them when Jill first had me investigate this. And I will say that we were behind on our reporting, which is a category that they look at when we submit applications. So I have completed the federal fiscal years that we were behind on for the most part. And Jill and I are going to try to finish those up. We may need to have some information filled in by you guys in order to get those completely finished, but they are mostly done. And also, like we were just talking about, determining the scope of this project, as Jill mentioned, where you guys want to take this, reiterating that we need to meet with MHT staff, and then, yeah, discuss the use of the inventory at a local level and any changes in policy that could benefit our resources. So those are the recommended steps moving forward. I've already taken care of that certified local government portion, a portion of it anyway. So we'll finish that up in the coming weeks. I'm not aware of any other funding mechanisms yet, but I'm hoping that MHT will be able to provide us with some more information on that if we meet with them.
When it comes to the heart of the Civil War heritage area, they have a pretty robust grant program. It would be matching money, and that obviously would be a problem. But for that specific stuff, there is a source for funding there.
I will make sure I leave that on. I had them written down in my notes, but I will make sure that I write that down for the PowerPoint when I send it back out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. That's giving us a lot to work on here. But this is some terrific work. So thank you, Megan.
Sure. So I'm going to package this up for you guys as a PDF. I actually already sent this to Edie, I believe. So I will make a couple tweaks to it with the typos and send that back out to you guys.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, the one thing that came to my mind, and this was early on when Jill said to prioritize resources, it's in a sense a triage of our historic holdings as you go through this inventory. And that the seriousness, the immediacy, those things you might have already included in the notes for each resource. But that would be very helpful to people who are asking for help to restore, refurbish, or to demolish, to know what they're looking at, how serious it is. In some way indicate that.
I mentioned that I would show you guys this. This is one of the inventory ranks that we've found so far. And this was kind of a simplified one, but I really liked the essential, important, notable, minor idea for if you guys were to go through that. And essential would definitely be like your National Register properties that we already have. Things that are essential, like your stone arch bridges and stuff like that. But important and notable, that's stuff that we could work out, and they have a bigger definition in their other documentation. But this is just one that I happen to like when I was looking through things. So it's just an option for you to think about when we say prioritization. This is kind of what where I was leaning with that thought.
Yeah, I think that could be useful. That's a good model.
I feel caution when that kind of idea is brought up, because there are some resources that don't appear to be notable or exceptional, but have important histories and are important without appearing to be so. So you just have to be cautious with those kind of flags.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's just the building, but the history that's tied to it.
I also would throw in there that the idea of the prioritization is really, you wouldn't be able to do that to the entire inventory at once and do a blanket unless you were just saying, okay, everything on the National Register is exceptional and everything else is blah. What I really wanted to get across is that if, for instance, you know that there's a lot of stuff going on in the urban growth area, perhaps one of the updates to the inventory that would occur would be to make sure that we have excellent or as high a quality documentation on historic resources that are within that urban growth area as possible, so that those properties could be reviewed by you guys or by the people that you hire or work with to do that survey update, to do those prioritizations at that time as well. That's just a thought.
That sounds good.
Yeah, very good. Okay. Megan, is this the last of your slides there?
Yes, you should see
Okay.
back. You should be back at the adjournment slide. Yeah.
Which I'll take as a hint.
We'll all accept that hint, Tom.
Okay, so I think we've got a lot to think about and work on here, but for now, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn. This is
Well,
Ann.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
All right, well-
Jill and Megan, for an excellent presentation.
Yeah.
This is real. Yeah, this has been really exceptional. We've had a lot to work on tonight and a lot to think about. So you all have really done a wonderful job. I'm glad to see you've used your quarantine time wisely. So, Jill, I take it that then we will again meet on the 1st of July, probably virtually again.
Most likely. I know that our Board of County Commissioners is starting to meet physically now, but given the current state of the governor's orders in terms of social distancing and the number of people that can be present at a meeting, we're going to be cognizant of that. And until that number starts to increase as far as how many can attend, we're likely going to stick to virtual meetings. As you said at the very beginning of this, out of an abundance of caution.